we did with the city of Medford. And the McGlynn school has the highest percent of special education students within their program. And a lot of students also have the highest amount of visual impairments as part of the program too. So these were pretty key elements as we worked on the design to keep in mind with how we were responding to what the community and students really needed. This is an overall plan of the design. You can see it's much more than just traditional play. There were 2 different zones for different age groups, so 2 to 5, 5 to 12, a paved area, and then a field as well. So we found that these different options really provided a lot of different types of play for the students, especially based on their needs. It was really important to meet with the community to really understand how we were applying the key tenets of universal design to the playground. And we did a lot of different outreach programs to do this. So really starting in 2022, that was when the project kicked off with the community outreach. And we had a lot of different types of events. So one of the first ones was our curriculum night tabling program that we did. And that was meeting with parents, students, and teachers specifically to understand pieces that they were interested in seeing and just get to know the community a little bit more. We also hosted a couple after-school workshops in September because it's really important to understand what the kids want since it's their playground and we need to understand what they want to see in it. We had so much great feedback from this, which I'll dive into a little bit more and how it applied to the actual play pieces and play spaces that we designed. We also had a tabling event at their Harvest Festival that was in September as well. And that one's open to the public. So we got a wider range of input from everyone at that event as well. Just understanding that a lot of the neighbors were also looking to use this park too. When it wasn't school hours, it's open to the public. So folks can use it after school and on weekends as well. And it is highly used. But then it's really important to note that we had a design committee that went throughout the whole time of the project. So from 2022 on, it actually still exists a little bit for a few items, but that was really important to have. So that was our design team. It also included the school principal, the district superintendent, and several other folks who were really enthusiastic about being part of this playground group. And those meetings were really essential because as we had questions throughout the project, we were able to connect with the principal who could then connect with the teachers to help get immediate feedback on what the kids needed and what the teachers needed. So now we're going to dive into how we started to apply these key tenets to the playground itself. So as I mentioned before, McGlynn has a really high percentage of students with visual impairments. And this really covers a wide range of different types of impairments. So anything from low visibility to color blindness to a lot of different types. And so we worked with the Perkins School for the Blind to really understand how folks with visual impairments perceive the world and what key features help give visual cues to organizing the space. So Perkins gave us really helpful advice on colors. And as we know from being landscape architects, it's important to have contrasting colors, but they were helpful in guiding us towards a very bright color like yellow that's used for alerting, since a shade of yellow is actually can be a little bit easier for anyone with color blindness. Some folks are able to see that still. So we applied this in many different ways. We applied it to the port in place safety surfacing. Anywhere we had a slope or a change in elevation, we used yellow. We also applied it to the play pieces themselves. So where we had stairs, where we had slides, where there were overhead elements, we used yellow as well. And part of this was actually through the school. They knew that they needed this as well. So they were able to modify some of the equipment and actually tape it after the fact, after it was installed, just to really help drive home all of these cues that are so important. We were also very consistent with the other colors. So brown was used for a safe pathway throughout the port in place rubber. It went around areas that helped students get to all the different types of play, but keeping out of the really high use areas. So giving them a safe way, if you're looking down, they'd be able to see this contrasting color and know it was safe for them to walk on. We then used cream in the port in place to really show where there would be an obstruction. So anywhere there was a play equipment post, we'd have cream at the base, so it was really high contrasting. since a lot of the posts were a very dark green color. This also applied to wayfinding and signage. We were really lucky that one of the people within our design committee actually was colorblind, but could offer really helpful on-the-spot advice in terms of colors and contrast and what he was able to see. He also recommended an online filter tool that we could use, so we could put in our design for any type of custom signage, and it would spit out, I think, up to like 8 different types of color blindness and low vision options. And so we could actually see how these different wayfinding pieces would be used, because it was really important that they could be used and needed to be, brightly colored where it was an important piece. And the interesting thing was, in talking to him, he would be like, yeah, the original and the version he had, he's like, they look the same to me. So it was really interesting to see like that is how he perceives the world, and really important to understand as we were designing these pieces. So something we noted too that was really important was a larger percentage of their students did use mobility devices. So having different types of sensory pathways throughout the playground was really helpful. These allowed kids the opportunity to really test out different types of surfacing or elevation changes in a really safe environment. So we had 2 different main sensory paths. One was material changes. You can see the image below has all these different types of materials. So something like wood logs, synthetic turf, gravel, and stones, just so they were able to test it out with their teacher to understand their skills and how to navigate these different materials. The image above is what we lovingly refer to as the wave. And this was a really fun piece to design. The intent here was that anyone using a mobility device or needs a little extra assistance to get around, you're able to test out your abilities in the real world, but everything is built to code. So this was looking at kind of like what if, like how far can you push your boundaries and see and go over, transverse these really steep slopes, but again, still be in a very safe environment, having the synthetic turf nearby. If you needed to step off, we had a couple of different places where you were able to get off the pathway if you just felt like it wasn't enough. But we found everyone during construction really gravitated to this piece, had a really fun time kind of walking up and down it and understanding the different elevation change. It was really fun to do. So diving into the 5 to 12 age group area a little bit more, this is where I mentioned we had a lot of requests from the students, and it was really important to include these in the design. So one thing we heard was they really wanted a double slide so they could race each other, and they wanted different types of slides. So it couldn't just be one, it had to be at least 2, and they wanted to go fast. So one part that was important to this was how to get up to these slides, because as you know, the higher a slide, the more ramps you're going to need, the more elevation change you'll have. So we actually implemented a sloped walkway that was under 5% to help get some elevation up to the play structure, and then used ramps from there to help get to the slides themselves. So it was a nice way to have a little bit more play, because we now introduced a lot of slopes and just different ways for kids to experience the playground, and put in some different climbers on the slopes as well. So it just added to the level of play as opposed to having an all ramped structure. We also heard from the teachers that they were concerned about having swings because of kids having low vision and the potential for a child to walk into someone in that high use area. So we discussed with them and decided to construct these yellow mounds that would help have a visual cue. So students with low vision would be stopped from going into these really active areas. They would know there was both an elevation change and a visual change that really helps guide them and show that they were entering a different zone and they needed to be more careful. We also heard that students wanted a lot of different elements like places to rest and places to have more imaginary play. So we heard from the 5th grade boys that they actually really wanted these restaurant style counters. So then the question became if it was seating or drive-by, and we ended up putting both in. But it was really important to actually test out the heights of these, because when this came just from the play vendor, it was set pretty low, but we knew the 5th graders were the ones who wanted to use it. So we actually worked with a student too and made sure we were getting these to the right height for a 5th grader. And then just making sure we had a wide range of play pieces that were really inclusive, that allowed anyone to be able to use them. So having pieces at grade or with a small ramp, just allowed anyone to be able to get on them and use them at any level. Looking at our 2 to 5 age group area, so this place we didn't have a main structure, but we had a lot of different types of play, since the main focus for the students was the 5 to 12, but we did know they needed a place for preschool as well. This was a little bit smaller, but it still had a lot of different types of play. So one thing that was important was really customizing these play pieces for the 2 to 5, understanding what the students needed here. So one thing we knew they wanted was a playhouse, but a lot of playhouses don't actually have the right turning radius to allow kids in wheelchairs to enter and fully use it and turn and get out. So we made sure to work with a vendor to customize it so it's a little bit wider and actually allows kids in wheelchairs to be able to get in and use it, as opposed to just roll in and then have to roll out backwards. It's not fair. They should be able to use it any way they want. We also knew that trunk support was really important. So in the 5 to 12 zone, we had that spinner that had seats, but this one, since it was a younger group, we knew that these kids would be with caretakers. So a caretaker would be able to help the kids get into the spinner, and having these back supports really helped with the trunk support. We also heard this on the seesaw that having different back options was really important. So we worked with a vendor just with their standard pieces. On one side, we had a backrest, which really helped if a student needed back support with a backrest, they were able to use it. The other side is backless. And the nice thing about this is it allows a student who doesn't need back support to use it, or if a student needs a caretaker to actually hold them in place while they're using it, this really helps. It just gives much more flexibility. So really working with vendors on these pieces was really important. So going through this, we did have several lessons learned, which I think is really important. As you're working through these inclusive playgrounds, because we're going above and beyond just the basic accessibility code, there are a lot of pieces that pop up of, things aren't as set in stone of requirements, and you're really working through a lot of different varied conditions. So one of the biggest lessons learned was just understanding the procurement process. When we put this out to bid, we had worked with the teachers and students to understand the type of main structure they wanted. So we knew we needed ramps, we knew we needed those different types of slides, different overhead ladder heights. There were all these important pieces that we needed. When the project was awarded and we had a contractor, the contractor decided to use the right to submit an equal product, which is, as we know in Massachusetts, they are fully entitled to do so. Where it became an issue was that our 2 other equals, we had just listed play vendors. We hadn't fully designed these 2 other structures. So it became a pretty involved process to make sure the equal they were proposing was a true equal. And it came down to counting the amount of play panels, making sure the play panels had more of the balcony style, allowing someone in a wheelchair to roll under and actually touch the play panel, as opposed to having to go from the side. Different types of climber to have these different types of abilities. If you want a harder climber, great, but they were submitting one that had all the same types of climbers, which was really not the intent of the product. So there was a lot of meetings involved to really get the piece to be what it needed to be, because this wasn't just a standard playground. This was really serving the needs of these students who needed it to be specialized for them. So a couple lessons learned is, if you are doing a custom structure, it's great if you can do a direct purchase, if you're able to. If that isn't the case, it would be good to work with vendors and have 3 fully designed equals if you're able to do so, or just have a more flexible space and a larger construction contingency, because we were pretty tight with the space. And if we'd had, a little extra budget and a little more space, we probably could have gotten some different options. But it was a lot of lessons learned, and we were able to make it work, but it was quite a process. Another lesson learned was on slide exits. This was for the embankment slide in the 2 to 5 area. So 2 to 5 slides, the ASTM and CBSC requirements are that they need to be a maximum of 11 inches off the ground for an embankment slide. That's per code. One thing that we added here was a dignity exit. So that allows for a user to, when they use the slide, they're able to shift over to the space and wait for a caretaker to either help them or to get a mobility device down. Dignity exits don't have the same requirements. There's no current ASTM or CBSC requirement on them. But we knew that with a transfer platform, that does have requirements. And so one of the people on the design committee assumed that because we were putting in a dignity exit, it would be a transfer platform by code. But as we looked into this, we realized unless you can get it to be exactly 11 inches, they don't quite overlap. It's a very tricky piece. And a transfer platform is just a place where someone's able to transfer from the platform to a mobility device. So it was something that was a little bit frustrating to learn. And because this slide was custom and had been ordered months in advance, we weren't able to change it at the time. But when we talked to this person on the committee and to the school, because this was in the 2 to 5 play area, it was understood that these children were younger and would still need support. So overall, it was okay that it was not fully meeting a transfer platform, but still met a dignity exit. So it worked out, but as a note to anyone who would like it to be both, make sure you get the height correct. And then this is probably the most important piece, is really hearing from people who are in the DEI community. Anyone who is using a mobility device, anyone who identifies with any of these pieces, it's really important to have their input. We were really lucky to work with a person from Medford's DEI department. He was actually had been a student at McGlynn many years ago, and he was super excited to see this coming to fruition. We were lucky enough to have him make several site visits during construction, and he actually gave really important advice because he was there testing these pieces as they were being constructed. So one thing he noted right away was we did have those slopes, as I mentioned, because we wanted the sloped walkways. But he was concerned that a student might get too excited and could potentially veer off the paved pathway. And because the slope was steeper, he was concerned about a student injuring themselves. So we talked as a group and we decided to implement these rubber curb edges as just a way, almost as a kick rail, to help keep folks on the pathway. And he was really happy with this option because not only did it provide another alerting contrasting color, but it really was a safety piece as well. So it's really great to hear that point of view from him. He also had really great advice on seating options. I think a lot of times, as landscape architects, we sometimes just put the block in for a seat and don't always think about where the view is for an accessible seat. And his advice was really making sure that the accessible seats are in a lot of different areas, so they have different views, especially we found for picnic tables, having views to the play area or to the field, just to give the choice for someone so they're not always forced into a specific view. It's really important that they can choose what they're looking at. So we were really grateful to have Nicholas involved, and I really recommend reaching out if you're able to find someone like this to help.